To the federal Constitution, a body of law that offers protection to all citizens against the tyrannies that have harried men down through the ages. These tyrannies prevail wherever some men deny to others the freedom to speak their minds. Wherever some men deprive others of the freedom to worship as they choose. Wherever some men judge others without regard for justice. Wherever some men use force without limit to deprive other men of their liberties or their lives. Wherever the personal liberties of men are denied, there is no freedom. This is the principle asserted in the Bill of Rights, doctrine of personal liberty basic to democracy. But down through history, men have had a constant struggle to make these freedoms part of the law of the land. In England in the 17th century, there was little freedom of speech or religion. But men were in revolt against the tyranny of Charles I. One such was William Prynne, the...
My lord, that's for me.
No, your lordship, I plead guilty to no crime. Mine is the right to speak right as I choose to the greater glory of God. You deny me my rights, even the right to a just trial by a jury of my peers. Your honors, do you imagine those outside would have me condemned for this?
Close the window. The sound of the rabble interferes with our work. Stand forth, Mr. Prynne. Well, I had thought Mr. Prynne had no ears, but methinks he doth have ears.
True, but it is certain they can be cropped more closely.
My lords, there is never a one among your honors, but would be sorry to have your ears as mine are.
No matter. I condemn you to lose your ears in the palace yard, to be fined 5,000 pounds, to be sent to perpetual imprisonment in a remote place in the kingdom.
And I condemn you to be stigmatized in the cheeks with 2 letters, S and L, for seditious libeler.
It took faith and courage to stand up for the freedom of men to speak and worship as they chose. But there were men to make the struggle, men defiant even under terrible duress.
I praise the Lord. It was for the general good and liberty of you all that I have engaged my own liberties in this cause. If you but knew into what times you are cast, you would look more narrowly into your privileges and see how far your liberty did lawfully extend and so maintain it.
The king used ruthless measures against the Puritans, but other Englishmen were coming to believe as Prynne did, and these measures failed to stem the fury of the revolutions that established civil liberties in England. At this time in America, men were fighting the same battle. In every colony, they struck out for the right to worship and speak and govern themselves in ways of their own choosing. In town meetings and colonial assemblies, they fought for the personal freedoms they believed belonged to every man as a God-given right. A victory for freedom of religion was the Toleration Act, adopted in Maryland in 1649. And in New York in 1734 came the first great contest over the freedom of the press. This was in the trial of John Peter Zenger, immigrant German printer. Zenger had been bold enough to attack the royal governor in his newspapers. His only crime was his courageous and telling exposure of the governor's corruption. But the judges were determined to convict him for libel. Zenger was defended by William Hamilton, who based his case on freedom of the press.
Gentlemen of the court, gentlemen of the jury, it is a privilege. I will go farther.
It is a right which all free men claim, to complain when they are hurt, publicly to remonstrate against abuses of power, to put their neighbors upon their guard against craft or open violence of men in authority, and to assert with courage the sense they feel of the blessings of liberty. This is not the cause of a poor printer, nor of New York alone, which you are now trying. No, it is the best cause. It is the cause of liberty.
Despite the resistance of the judges, the jury had the courage to acquit Zenger. This bold decision led the way to a free press in America. For years, the struggle for men's liberties went on throughout the colonies, till at last the American people rose in rebellion against the king and parliament. This was a contest for self-government, but to many Americans, it also became a struggle for the rights of man. In the turbulent decade from the uprising against the Stamp Act to the occupation of Boston by British troops, the colonists drifted into rebellion, till suddenly the Minutemen who stood on the green at Lexington and braved the British at Concord Bridge changed rebellion into a war for independence. In 1776, the colonies declared their separation from the British Crown. In Virginia and other colonies, conventions were called to draw up constitutions creating new governments. Among the leaders of the Revolution in Virginia was Thomas Jefferson. He, like many Americans, had come to believe that the protection of human liberties was the true purpose of all government.
I see, Mr. Berkeley. You find these propositions distasteful.
Yes, Mr. Jefferson, Mr. Mason, I cannot accept them.
Then let us reconcile our differences. I believe we agree that the new Virginia Constitution must embody a Bill of Rights.
I can promise you, Mr. Jefferson, there will be a Bill of Rights.
Well and good, Mr. Mason. But, Mr. Jefferson, this matter about freedom of religion, is it wise?
Not wise, perhaps, but necessary.
But you open the door to atheists, to disbelievers.
Perhaps. But the legitimate powers of government extend to such acts only as are injurious to others. It does me no injury for my neighbor to say there are 20 gods or no God. It neither picks my pocket nor breaks my leg.
And freedom of religion is the key to freedom of all opinion.
So I fear. And I tell you, gentlemen, I abhor the thought of government indifferent to error of opinion.
But you are wrong, sir. It is error alone that needs the support of government. Truth can stand by itself. Subject opinion to coercion. Whom will you make your inquisitors?
Strange that you, gentlemen, men of substance and owners of slaves, should embrace a doctrine so counter to your interest.
But the doctrine is sound.
Jefferson saw in the Revolution a chance to make these liberties secure. The convention met to frame a constitution for the new free state of Virginia. Through the efforts of Jefferson and Mason, it adopted a Bill of Rights. The bill contained guarantees of freedom of religion and freedom of the press and affirmed the principles of due process of law. A few weeks later in Philadelphia, the Continental Congress gave to Jefferson the task of drafting the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson made this document the most eloquent declaration of the rights of man ever written. In its preamble, he asserted in ringing phrases the beliefs about human freedom that had come to be the aims of the Revolution.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with
certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
In these words, Jefferson rallied his countrymen to a struggle for human rights. In the years of the war that followed, Americans were to prove again and again that men would fight against oppression if they believed they were fighting for their rights as men and as citizens. Through all these years of bloody conflict, the devotion of men to freedom served to build up national strength and security. When victory came, the Patriots went home expecting to build a nation founded on principles of human liberty. In 1787, the convention meant to frame a federal constitution. The words of the Declaration of Independence still were resounding in the minds of men. Some of the delegates insisted that a Bill of Rights be written into the Constitution. Others believed these rights were already well protected by the states. This was to become the major issue in the struggle over adoption.
Yes, Mr. Madison, you are raising up a power that is more terrible than the tyranny we so recently overthrew. Your Constitution will have too much of a centralizing tendency.
Oh, I cannot agree, sir. For it is neither wholly federal nor wholly national, but something of both.
I tell you, this centralizing tendency is far from strong enough to suit my taste, Mr. Mason.
You would have monarchy, Mr. Hamilton. I fear that we shall have it even with this. What protection does your Constitution offer for the people's liberties?
Yes. Where is the Bill of Rights? We must have some assurance that the people's rightful freedoms will remain secure.
But why? The people surrender nothing in the Constitution. They retain everything and so have no need of particular reservations.
Besides, it does contain safeguards of personal liberty in the courts of justice. And other personal rights of citizens are guarded by the constitutions of the states.
That is no guarantee and no protection against an overbearing central power.
No, sir. And perhaps there is no protection possible.
When at last the delegates gathered to sign their names to the draft of the Constitution, it contained no Bill of Rights. The convention had adopted certain guarantees of due process of law, but had failed to put in other guarantees of personal liberty. Mason and Governor Randolph of Virginia, Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts, and other delegates refused to sign the document. They feared that without a Bill of Rights, the Constitution might lead to tyrannical government. They went home to launch a fierce attack against adoption. Public feeling ran high. In Massachusetts, the convention called to ratify the Constitution was against it. The delegates feared that it would lead to rule by the wealthy and propertied classes. To overcome this opposition, the Friends of the Constitution offered a compromise. They proposed that the convention demand that a Bill of Rights be added by amendment. This gained ratification in Massachusetts.
Resolved further that this convention recommend the drafting of a Bill of Rights to be incorporated in a set of amendments to be ratified by the several states.
But the outlook for ratification was still dark in a number of states. The Federalist leaders labored vigorously to win the people over to the new principles of government.
What do you say to this language, Mr. Hamilton? The proposed Constitution is in strictness neither a national nor a federal Constitution, but a composition of both.
Keen argument, Mr. Madison, but to little use. Everyone reads the Federalist Papers, but few are persuaded by them.
You are right, I fear.
Certainly Governor Clinton and his faction are going to make things hot for you in New York.
Clinton is a dangerous demagogue. But we will defeat him, even if we have to threaten to withdraw the city of New York from the rest of the state.
I regret that we have no such weapon as that in Virginia.
Yes. Virginia is in danger, too. With both Mason and old Patrick Henry thundering against us.
And Henry cannot be won over. He calls the Constitution a conspiracy to set up a monarchy.
A firebrand. How will you answer him?
As I see it, there is but one workable answer, and that's the one reached in Massachusetts. Federalists in every state must agree to a Bill of Rights.
I suppose it is, but it will not win over such men as Clinton and Henry.
No, but it offers us our last best chance to save the Constitution.
Madison's proposal brought about the adoption of the Constitution by a narrow margin, and Madison kept to his purpose. When the new government was formed, he became a member of Congress. Under his leadership, one of the first tasks of the Congress was to prepare a set of amendments to the Constitution. Madison drew together the resolutions of the conventions and the Bills of Rights in the constitutions of the various states. Then he drafted a set of 12 amendments embodying the essential guarantees of personal liberty. 10 of these amendments were ratified by the Congress and the states. These became the American Bill of Rights, the Charter of Personal Liberty.
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting or abridging the freedom of speech or the press or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
These are the principles of freedom. These are goals for which men must constantly do battle. For wherever some men destroy the freedom of others to speak their minds, wherever some men sit in judgment on other men without regard for justice, wherever men use force without limit to deprive other men of their liberties or their lives, here there is a need to fight for freedom. And in today's world, as in other times, citizens may well heed the warning of long ago.
If you but knew into what times you are cast, you would look more narrowly into your privileges and see how far your liberty did lawfully